are firearms about to get so expensive because they have to account for the ultimate settlement payments in these lawsuits that no one but millionaires can afford them? We're the Arms Attorneys. Today we're talking about breaking news. Remington Arms has settled their lawsuit from the Sandy Hook family for $73 million. Stick around to the end. We're going to break down why this is such a bad precedent that has been set now for firearm manufacturers everywhere. And before we get started, while the video is rolling, go ahead and leave us a comment. Tell us how you think this case should have been handled. Richard, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, to start this conversation, we're going to have a little bit of background. And the law that controls and was controlling in this matter was the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, also known as the PLCAA, and this is in Title 15 of the United States Code. And what this law essentially does is protects firearms and ammunition manufacturers if their products are used in the way that they're intended, essentially.
Right, not like, when we're talking about mass shootings, which is what we're talking about right now, not that the product was intended for a mass shooting, but that, you aim the firearm, you pull the trigger, it shoots, right? That's what we're talking about.
Right. And there's, some carve-outs for this law that make it, fit more squarely in our other jurisprudence. And if the gun manufacturers use deception or breach their contract or are negligent, if there's a manufacturer's defect, this doesn't really cover that. What we're talking about is if the firearm's used in the way that it's intended, that the manufacturers shouldn't be on the hook for, liability at the end of the day. Now, there was one important exception that was at issue in this case, and then that has to do with how the firearm is marketed. And we see this come up from time to time, and a good example would be tobacco companies. They're restricted on the way that they can advertise to children, for example. Some states have laws saying, hey, gas stations, you can't put tobacco ads at children eye level, And so if, for example, a firearm was marketed or advertised in a way that was in violation of state or federal law, the PLCAA does not kick in. And so that's really what the issue was. And then we come to, the Sandy Hook shooting incident up in Connecticut. You want to give us a brief rundown of that?
This incident occurred in 2012. In 2014, the families filed a lawsuit against Remington, alleging essentially that the Bushmaster was marketed in violation of Connecticut law, and that it was marketed essentially as a people killer, is their allegation. That trial court judge, first it got removed between state and federal court several times, which is, an interesting twist, but ultimately returned to state court. And that state court judge in Connecticut said, you know what, I'm going to dismiss this lawsuit. So this lawsuit's never seen a jury, by the way. I'm going to dismiss this lawsuit because Remington's protected by the PLCAA. You can't hold them financially responsible for the acts of this horrible human who killed all these children. Remington's gun functioned as it was supposed to function. They're protected. Then the plaintiffs appealed that case to the Connecticut Supreme Court. Connecticut Supreme Court revived it and said, no, actually, we think that this falls into that exception that Richard was talking about a moment ago to the PLCAA. Essentially, they violated Connecticut's, marketing fraud laws is the allegation by, marketing it as something that is cool to kill humans with, which I think, that's one issue that should have reached a jury, in my opinion, but we'll talk about that a little further later. Ultimately, Remington took that decision of the revival of the case, appealed that to the United States Supreme Court, who declined to review and didn't even comment on their decline to review, which is too bad because there's actually a little bit of a circuit split about how different parts of the country and different federal courts
unresolved.
Treat, the PLCAA. So we have a lot of questions still. It sort of surprises me the Supreme Court didn't take it up. But now, rather than taking it to that ultimate jury and actually going to trial, Remington has agreed to settle for $73 million with the families.
Which this is just an unbelievable precedent. I can't, we try to be no hype gun news and 2A, and we try to be pretty sensible about these things, but this is truly a terrible precedent for the 2A community.
Yeah, and and I think this should go without saying, but just for anyone who's watching this already typing an angry comment, our hearts are with the Sandy Hook families. It's unimaginable to me what they're going through, and this is just a pure analysis of the law and the legal precedent, and by no means has anything to do with their pain and what they are going through. But yes, and to not even send it to a jury to figure it out, because we have I think the issue of was it really marketed as a people killer, which I don't believe so, having
No.
seen the ads. And then two, we have this other issue, which is that the Sandy Hook killer didn't actually buy the gun,
Yes.
right? His mother bought it.
Yeah, so that's what we call an intervening cause. So you have negligence. So we have this duty of care in the law, and that's saying, hey, I owe other people a duty. And depending on how you're situated with the other party, you have a heightened duty or a lower duty. And, one thing that kills this duty is when you have an intervening cause, something that neither party controls and can, uphold either end of their bargain. And that's what we see when we have a criminal stealing a firearm.
Right. So, I mean, let's say, and I don't believe this to be true, but for the purposes of argument, let's say that the Sandy Hook killer's mother saw the Remington ads and said, that's a great people killer. I'm buying it because it's a people killer. Well, then what her son ultimately does with it means nothing when it comes to the ads, because the ads didn't influence him at all.
Right.
And so now we're left with a case that I think really should have seen a jury, and should have seen ultimately, even if a jury made the wrong decision, should have seen, some logic from an appeals court.
Right.
But also, this is the first time in the history of the United States that a firearm manufacturer has been held responsible for the actions of the killer who used their product. And we've got here, I think, probably a PR decision on the part of Remington, but one that could hurt, the whole manufacturing community.
And it comes back to why this is so dangerous for the Second Amendment community and for those who want to exercise their Second Amendment rights, because this is the equivalent of a car manufacturer, Ford, getting sued for the actions of a drunk driver. If Ford got sued and had to settle tens of millions of dollars every time a drunk driver, took the life of someone, then Ford would be run out of town. And at the end of the day, your Second Amendment rights don't mean anything. It's not worth the paper it's written on if you don't have access to the tools to exercise your rights. And that's what we see could possibly happen as a result of this decision.
Yeah, our firearms about to get so expensive because they have to account for the ultimate settlement payments in these lawsuits that no one but millionaires can afford them.
Yeah, well, and I know I probably would have fought this to a jury. I'm sure you would have made the same decision. And at the end of the day, it may have been a publicity or PR move.
There's a focus group out there that told Remington that it wasn't a good look to take this to trial. I have to imagine it was something like that.
Yeah, but we will see. This is still, breaking news, but we want to hear from you. What do you think about this situation? If you enjoyed this discussion, leave a comment. We want to hear what you have to say, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video. This news is very important, and it needs to spread to other law-abiding citizens and people who care about the Second Amendment.
Thanks to all you Second Amendment defenders out there. Until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.